I have testimonies. I'm going to ask that they come together. Gerald Edgemeyer, Guidance Center Core Program, and John Hayden from Share House Incorporated. They would come at this time.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak this morning. My name is John Hayden, and I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. I'm also a child of an alcoholic. One of the things I would also like to say thank you for is to Share House and its executive director, Alan Bray. They came into the prison and got me, and he did an open talk there. And he shared with us that he hadn't touched heroin in 32 years. I never thought that was possible. And I sat in the audience like you did, and I just cried like a baby because I didn't ever believe that anybody could overcome this dreaded disease of addiction. But my life, you know, as I said, I come up under an alcoholic father who was very abusive, mentally, emotionally, and physically. I had 3 other brothers. Last year, 2 of them died to this disease. One of them took a shotgun out to the Metro Park and blew his brains out. And the other one died of cirrhosis of the liver because he couldn't stop drinking. Powerlessness. I'm powerless over drugs and alcohol. I'm powerless over people, places, and things. And there was a time that I didn't understand that. You know, when I first began going to school, I didn't feel like I belonged. I didn't feel like I fit in. I was that child that they talked about, really. So my name is John, and I was beaten too. But I didn't share my bruises. I didn't talk about my bruises because I was afraid if I did, I'd get another beating. And that's what I was told. I couldn't express what was going on in my family. And there was a lot of shame there. I couldn't bring none of the kids home to see my father, to see my family in the condition they were in. So from an early childhood on, I didn't really have much of a chance, you know, and I wasn't taught about recovery till much later in my life after beginning to go into the juvenile halls at the age of 12 and going away for years of my life at the age of 14, not understanding why I couldn't stop, you know, what was going on. You know, people told me about a loving God, and I used to pray and ask Him to help me. Because I didn't understand it. If He loved me, how come He would allow, you know, this monster in my home to whoop me like He did, and to whoop my mother, and to treat my brothers in the way in which He did. When I was 8 years old, I led my brother and myself and some other friends on an excursion into a neighbor's garage and stole their go-kart. You know, we was poor too, and I wanted what everybody else had, and I didn't know how to get it. And when we were caught by the police, we were brought home. And we were made to wait in the bedroom for our beating. And after I got my beating, I had to sit there and watch my little brother get beaten until the belt busted over his back. And you know, I carried a lot of guilt and a lot of shame for that for all my life. And I never knew how to deal with it. And it always came out of me sideways in my behaviors. I'm a convicted criminal. I've been a convicted criminal since I was right around the age of 11. But I began stealing at the age of 7. And my father walked all the way to the store that day when they caught me in the store, just so that he could beat me all the way home in front of all the neighbors and all the people that knew me. And it was a severe beating. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand anything was going on. And I began to isolate and hide from the world in my basement. I began to use alcohol and I began to use drugs. And that seemed to be the answer for me for all my pain, for all my heartache. I didn't have to focus on anything else going on around me. If I got beaten or got grounded, I would just go into my basement and hide. Or I would go out into the neighborhoods and steal. And I looked for acceptance. I would break into people's homes and get their money, and I would go out and spend it all on all my friends, just looking to be loved, looking to be accepted by my peers. I spent 20 plus years of my life incarcerated. I couldn't stop no matter what. I would go away for 7 years and I would come right back out and I would start using. And I didn't understand it. How come I couldn't stop after all that pain, after all that loneliness, after all that missing of my family, of my mother, and seeing her heart broken time and time again, and I still couldn't stop. I was totally out of control, and I thought that I was going to lose my life, either in prison or in somebody's home. My crimes went on to become breaking and enterings, larceny from trains, assault with intent to rob unarmed. I began beating on people, taking their money. I also did this behaviors in the prisons. In the prison, it was my job to break security and find out how I could get dope in there. I was in there for committing felonies, and I was still in there committing felonies because I couldn't stop. I didn't know how to stop. And Share House brought a program into the prisons. One last thing before I go into that. You know, on my last days out there, I was homeless. Nobody wanted me in their home. They couldn't trust me in their home. I was selling myself. I had also become a prostitute on the streets for just one more blow, one more drink, heaping shame upon myself. And I asked God to kill me because I just couldn't stand the thought of going back to prison one more time. And I just thank Him today that I'm alive and that I'm here. And they just told me, tell the truth, John, you don't have to remember anything. And it's not about them, it's about you. Do you want to get free of this disease? Do you want to get free? And I was scared to death because I was in a prison house and they told me that I had to confront people's behaviors as well as my own. I had to tell the brothers that they couldn't carry no shanks across the yard, that they had to put up their dope, that they had to quit shooting moves. And as somebody else said, you stand alone when you're fighting this fight sometimes. Or you feel like you're standing alone until you go into your prayer closet. You know? Thank God for the prayer closet, because I was able to get down on my knees. I was so angry and so full of rage the first couple months of treatment that I thought my mind was going to snap. And I just asked him to please help me, you know, because I finally admitted that I could no longer help myself. That I was truly powerless, that I was beaten. You know, I got out of the prisons, and it was my first day out that I learned that my second oldest brother had killed himself. And he also was an addict and a drunk, and had been living with this disease for 30-some years as well. And my little brother Chris died 6 months later. Unfortunately, I did not deal with this second death as well as I did the first one, and I relapsed. And I began using heroin all over again, and I began the lifestyle all over again. But there wasn't one day that I enjoyed being high anymore, because they gave me a taste of truth and freedom that I never knew about. And I don't care how many blows I put on top of it, it wouldn't go away. Jesus don't go away like that. You know, he don't go away. 1,000 blows on top of him. He's coming to life in you once he's in you. Thank God for this. It's unfortunate that somehow or another that the state of Michigan has cut out the foreign funding for the RSAT program. And that's where I was reached at, is in the prisons. And the gospel tells us to go into the prisons. It tells us to go into the hospitals. It tells us that he came to heal the sick, not the whole. Not the one with all the answers. Truly, I didn't feel that anybody was sicker than me, you know, and I still don't. I was afflicted with a disease that is cunning, baffling, and powerful, and without help, it was way too much for me. But it brought me to my knees, and it gave me a relationship with a loving God that I don't ever want to leave again. And I want to share my story. About 4 weeks ago, and this is the last thing I want to share, I asked God to use me in a way that he seemed fit to use me. And I've never done this public speaking, but I have a motivation to reach the many people out there who are still suffering, and who are still sick, and who's still hurt, and who's still in the abandoned house, who's still committing prostitution, who's still breaking into homes, and who's on the brink of death, and who at this very moment is probably killing himself. And he answered my prayer. You know, Alan, the executive director, Mr. Alan Wright, called me into his office last week and asked me if I'd go talk in front of the empowerment zone. And I said, sure. But as the time drew near, I got a little bit more scared and a little bit more nervous. But I thank God for the program, because they told me just to share it, to talk about it, because a problem shared is a problem cut in half. So I go to the meetings and I share it, I talk about it, and I feel much better today. I'm very grateful to be alive in the free world. I couldn't get one of those crescents in the prison. You know, I couldn't get a nice fruit breakfast in the prison. I couldn't walk down to the street to a McDonald's. I couldn't pet the cats that's in our house. I couldn't pet the dog. And you know, last week I went home and I seen my mother 2 weeks ago. And one thing I could do for her, which I couldn't do when